ready for a scary journey in an empty theme park. Lights go off, strange creatures show up. Can the main character run away, or will something bad happen? Listen to this spooky story with more to come. Don't forget to subscribe for more creepy tales. Once upon a time, it was my first night working at Disneyland as the night watchman. In other places, I'd be called a regular security guard, but here, they called me a cast member. That sounded really fancy. It was midnight, and all the cleaners and maintenance workers had finished their jobs and gone home. Now it was my turn to start my shift, and I have to admit, I was a bit nervous. My manager, who was guiding me through the entrance, asked, "How many times have you been to the park, kid?" I nervously replied. "How many times have you visited the park?" he asked again. "Well, pretty much every year since I was 8, sir," I answered. "Then you'll do perfectly," he confidently said. "Someone who knows the park inside out. Just what we need." "It's an honor," I said with a nod. "And it'll be a nice paycheck for college. Just make sure you're not scared of spending long hours alone in a security office, surrounded by areas filled with animatronic characters," my manager, Travis, joked, trying to tease me out of my new job. I wondered, what's the worst that could happen? The answer to that question would only be in my darkest nightmares and nowhere else. I wasn't the type to believe in ghosts or the supernatural. I thought I'd be fine, maybe just a little bored sometimes. Travis took me to a gray door with a sign that said, "Authorized personnel only." He handed me a key and said, "Go ahead, open it up." I twisted the key in the door, and it opened easily. The hallway was dark, but Travis turned on the lights. It was so wide and long, like in a big building. At the end of it, there was a blue door that said security. It had 2 big windows on each side. Boxes filled the hallway, and I thought they had equipment inside. Travis told me to open the door, and he gave me another key. I unlocked it, and we went into a big room. There were 4 big desks, each with lots of screens on the wall above them. The first desk showed the main entrance in the famous Main Street, USA area. There were cameras everywhere, even inside the shops and restaurants. The second desk had more cameras showing different parts of the park like Adventureland, Discoveryland, Frontierland, Fantasyland, New Orleans Square, Critter Country, and Mickey's Toontown. I could see every corner and spot in these places. The third desk had cameras inside the rides. Yeah, inside the rides. Now Splash Mountain looked like a dark, silent cave with animatronic characters staring in different directions. Even Pirates of the Caribbean looked the same, just dark and filled with skeletons. Travis patted my back and asked, "What do you think?" "Pretty cool, huh?" I nodded quietly and said, "It's impressive." "This is your new office," he said. "Never thought you'd end up here when you were riding Space Mountain as a kid, huh?" "Nope, never." I chuckled, grabbing a drink from the water cooler near the third desk. I took a sip and turned on the desk fan. Travis noticed me looking at the screens and said, "I know what you're thinking. Don't even try it." I looked at him, puzzled. "Try what?" "I know nostalgia can be strong," he explained. "But don't try to turn on the rides and go for a solo drive." He laughed, letting me know he was joking. I laughed too and said, "I'd get fired right away. I know my place." Sitting in the spinning desk chair, I added, "I won't leave this office until you come back in the morning." "No need to go overboard," Travis said. "You can take a bathroom break." "Got it," I nodded. Travis looked at the cameras and asked, "Any questions, or are you all set for now?" "I'm all set," I confidently replied, surprisingly excited about the job. "Okay," Travis said proudly. He took a card from his pocket and placed it on the desk. "If you have any questions or if there's an emergency, though I doubt it'll ever happen, give me a call." I took the card and put it in my pocket. "I will. Thanks." "Good luck, kid," he said, opening the office door. He looked back and added, "Check those cameras, be wary of anything, and try not to doze off." No way. I had a good nap in the afternoon at my apartment for a reason. The door creaked, then clicked. Travis was gone, and I was all alone at Disney. Maybe I should try the rides. Nah. I wouldn't do that, even if it sounded tempting. I was broke and needed money for college. Messing with the rides would mean no money for me. So, I sat on my little desk chair, waiting and keeping my eyes on those cameras. Mostly, nothing happened. I saw slightly blurry videos of the empty park. The only sound was the quiet hum of the desk fan, keeping me cool. Honestly, if I turned off that fan, things would get bad for me quickly. I didn't like complete silence. It let my mind play tricks on me. With that in mind, I turned up the fan and took out my phone to pick some music. I swiped through my music library, trying to decide. I chose Ryan Farish. His happy music would keep things from getting creepy. I turned up the volume, placed the phone on the table, and focused on the cameras. I wouldn't be telling the truth if I said the sight wasn't a bit strange and made me feel uneasy. It's not like something weird was happening. Actually, nothing was going on at all. The park was empty. In the office, Ryan Farish's music kept things happy. But outside, in the park, it was just quiet. I sat there, and the streets were dark, with only a few lights here and there. The night vision cameras showed me everything in the park, but I mostly kept an eye on the main gates. Other cameras caught my attention too, but the gates were the main focus. Now, the inside of the attractions was a different story. I tried not to look at them much. It was part of my job to check them, but something felt off. Again, nothing strange was happening. My overactive imagination was to blame for the weird feelings when I looked at those cameras. Seeing all the animatronic characters in total darkness and silence, with their lifeless eyes and weird mouth positions, gave me chills. You can call me childish, but I wasn't used to seeing them like this. It was the opposite of what you see during the daytime when you actually go on these rides. I told myself, "You've watched too many scary movies, dude. Remember, it's all part of the job." I stood up from my desk to stretch my legs. It was 1:10 a.m., and sitting and staring at cameras for an hour was making me uncomfortable. I did a few exercises and jogged in place for a bit. I stopped only to get water from the cooler, 3 drinks so far. It was time for a quick bathroom break. I looked at all the cameras, including the ride interiors, before grabbing my key. When I unlocked the second door, I was surprised by the sight and feel of the empty park. It was silent and dark, with only the small lights marking the nearby bathroom. I walked over, ignoring the eerie feeling of the deserted park, and did what I needed to do. After washing up, I headed for the door. Just as I was passing the exit, a sharp sound startled me. I looked up at the bathroom's outer lights, or what was left of them. Sparks of electricity came from the sockets, casting a faint glow around. "Ugh," I muttered, looking at the glass shards on the floor. "Better clean this up." But not with my hands. The exploded bulbs could be hot, and I didn't want to risk cutting myself. Luckily, there was a broom and basket in my office. I walked over, taking in the quiet, and tried to open the gray door to the hallway. It didn't open. Confused, I jiggled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It locked itself. It was a bit weird, but I didn't think it was a big problem. Maybe the door was designed to lock itself automatically when closed. It made sense for security reasons, keeping people out of restricted areas. I casually shrugged and used the key to unlock it, no problem there. Surprisingly, the blue office door stayed unlocked. I got the broom and trash basket and went back to the restrooms for a quick cleanup. "You'd make a great janitor," I said to myself, trying to shake off the feeling of being alone. I swept the glass into the basket and took it back to the security office. I unlocked the hallway door again and locked it behind me. The office door, which I had left open, was now closed. I didn't think much of it. I just wanted to bring the basket in, sit in front of the cameras, turn up my music, and relax. But for some reason, the 2 trips outside the office made me feel uneasy. Maybe it was my imagination acting up again, but I felt something, like someone was watching me. Then again, I always felt that way. As a kid, a teenager, and now as a young adult, I had a fear of the dark, or more accurately, a fear of being alone in it. I learned to control it, but it never really went away. I put the broom and basket against the wall and tried to open the door, but it was locked too. What? Maybe they had the same security measure for this door as the hallway? If that's the case, why was it unlocked the first time I came back? Maybe it just broke the first time? Anyway, I didn't think too much about it. I used the key and went in without worrying. After putting down the broom and basket, I went for the chair, leaned back a bit, and rubbed my temples before looking at the cameras. Checking each one, I didn't see anything strange. Everything looked fine. Good. I turned my music back on, bobbing my head to the beat. After a few minutes of doing that and checking the cameras, everything suddenly went silent. The music stopped. The phone screen turned black. I got suspicious. What the heck? I tried turning the phone on again, but nothing happened. I took the charger from my bag and plugged it in, but still nothing. Not even the low battery icon showed up. The phone was completely dead. Great. It was an old phone, about 4 years old, so I shouldn't be too surprised. Probably had a big problem from getting old or something. Whatever happened, it wasn't good. My office went back to total silence. Great. Well, I hoped I could get the phone fixed somehow. For now, I had to deal with being bored. Moving to the music was the only thing keeping me entertained. It also helped me stay calm. As time passed, boredom and nerves mixed inside me. Except for the fan's low sound, the office was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. And then, a knock on a door. Yes, the gray hallway door. It was a single, loud knock breaking the silence in the worst way. I tensed up in my chair, not daring to look behind me. I kept my eyes on the cameras, especially the ones in Main Street, USA, and the one outside the main security door. No one was there. Not even a hint of a person. Everything seemed normal. Knock, knock. My heart raced. I quickly turned in my chair to face the doors. That second knock? It sounded closer, like it came from the door to my office. I stood up and stayed still for a moment, looking at the door and wondering whether to check it or not. Finally, I decided to take a step forward. I carefully opened the door and stepped out, looking around in the hallway. Everything looked completely normal. There were no signs of any activity. Even the boxes were in the exact same places as when I first got here. Maybe it was just my imagination. I really need to calm down. With that thought, I shrugged and headed for the door back into my office, when a super loud thud from outside the hallway door caught my attention. A second bang on the door almost made me jump. I stood there, almost frozen, with my eyes locked on the door. What's going on? This time, I wasn't calm. I ran back into the office and grabbed a broomstick. I took off the actual broom and brought just the stick with me. I was going out. Cautiously, slowly but surely, I was going out. Whatever it was, I was going to figure it out. The cameras near the office showed me nothing, but they could be glitching. I took a deep breath and approached the door with the broomstick in hand. A faint scraping noise came from it just as I was about to touch the handle. It stopped me for a second, my mind trying to make sense of it all. Do it. I slowly opened the door and peeked outside. Nothing. Hello? I said, hearing only silence. Of course, even if there was an intruder, they wouldn't answer the security guard. I looked around and shrugged, not seeing anything. I chuckled nervously and said, I really am going crazy. Rolling my eyes at myself, I went back to the office, unlocking both doors, and sat in front of the cameras again. I positioned the fan to blow in my face and sighed, feeling relieved. As much as I wanted to think it was my mind playing tricks, deep down, I couldn't. I heard the knocks. I didn't imagine them. Whether it was some weird sound thing I didn't know about, or something else entirely. I knew it wasn't my imagination. My thoughts got interrupted by my dead phone suddenly ringing. I looked at it, confused, and saw unknown caller flashing on the screen. I hesitated but answered after a few uneasy seconds. Talk to me. Hello, my manager's voice came loudly through the speaker, sounding really worried. Is everything all right? I didn't know how to answer. His tone made me freeze for a moment. Never mind, Travis said quickly. You need to leave the park now. Why, what's going on? Just do it, he yelled, making me bite my tongue. I'll explain later. Right now, there's no TI. Travis? I nervously said, my voice barely above a whisper. What's wrong? Suddenly, terrified and painful screams burst through the silence. I felt helpless, with no choice but to keep the phone against my ear and start hyperventilating. Travis. I yelled. And then, silence. Travis. I softly said, terrified beyond words. Slow, thumping footsteps broke the silence, getting closer to the phone speaker by the second. The closer they got, the more uneasy I felt. It almost seemed like they were coming from the security office. From behind me. The footsteps stopped, and raspy, labored breathing came directly from the phone. See, soon. The voice quiveringly said, sounding disturbingly unnatural and chilling me to the core. Terrified, my whole body froze. My hand lost its grip on the phone, and it fell to the floor. I started shaking uncontrollably, backing up against the wall. I shut my eyes, hoping I'd wake up from the nightmare. Opening them only confirmed I was still in the office. It wasn't a nightmare. I really heard Travis being murdered through the phone, and now his killer was coming for me. But what did he want? What did any of this have to do with me? And how did he know where I was? Another loud bang on the hallway door snapped me out of my thoughts. I screamed, standing up and fixing my eyes on the door, waiting to see what would happen. Nothing. Suddenly, the lights went out. The security cameras switched off. Both the office and the hallway became completely dark. A thick blanket of darkness scared me, pushing me over the edge of terror. I scrambled to find the light switch on the wall but couldn't. My fingers scratched the walls in a desperate search. My phone was the other option. Its flashlight would light up the room. I pulled it out of my pocket and started pressing buttons, only to find it was dead again. Come on, come on. I growled in fearful desperation. Work, you piece of... Creak. What was that? Creak. If I wasn't mistaken, I just heard the door to my office slowly opening by itself. The darkness prevented me from seeing anything, letting my imagination run wild. The creaking sound slowed down before the door clicked closed. Creepy footsteps echoed through the darkness, getting closer to me. My heart raced, and I was covered in sweat. Fear shook my entire body. As the footsteps approached, I was completely helpless. All I could do was press myself against the wall and wait. But nothing happened. The footsteps stopped. I had no idea if the source was right in front of me or halfway across the room. The question got answered when the lights suddenly switched back on. They flickered but were back. I couldn't complain, but I was alone in the room. Not even a shadow in sight, just mine. I took a deep breath, wiped sweat from my forehead, and looked back at the cameras. Unlike the lights, they remained off, showing only my reflection. I tapped one out of curiosity, and the reflection showed something, or someone, else in my working space. A shadowy figure with unclear features stood right behind me, its head slowly tilting. I jumped back from the screen and turned around. Nothing was there. The lights went out again, making me groan in frustration and fear. The sound of the office door slamming shut pushed me back against the wall in fear. It was slammed open, and the loud thud came with the shattering of the glass windows on either side. The door to the hallway, supposedly locked, was harshly opened too. Whatever I was dealing with just got rid of the only things between me and it. I didn't want to leave the office. No one would. But I knew I had to and find a good hiding spot. Escaping the park was impossible with the gates locked. It knew I was here. It was challenging me. I could almost feel it. I wasn't sure of this thing's purpose, but one thing I was sure of. It wasn't human. And it wanted to either drive me insane or kill me. Or maybe both. "You can do this," I said, trying to console myself. You're gonna get through this." I repeated those words in my mind and slowly walked through the darkened hallway toward the main door. The lights above me flickered erratically with every step, making me slow down from sheer nervousness. Again, I had that strange feeling, eyes on me. I could feel something watching my every move. I looked over my shoulder, reassuring myself there was nothing there, and continued my cautious walk down the seemingly never-ending hallway. Every step felt like a mile as my mind flooded with thoughts about the unknown force putting me through all this. The same thing that apparently took Travis's life. What is it? What does it want with me? Why bring Travis into it? Is there some history to all of this? For questions, zero answers, but it didn't matter to me now. The only thing that mattered was finding a good place to hide. Was I being tormented by a paranormal force, the kind I never believed in? Definitely. I had no doubts. But I doubted it was an all-knowing force capable of finding me no matter where I hid. My feet stopped upon reaching the open hallway door. One more step was all I needed, but fear overwhelmed me. Leaving the office, fully exposing myself to this entity, wasn't pleasant. You're a sitting duck here. Move. Where am I supposed to go? Somewhere this thing can't find me? It's probably watching me already. Don't hide. Run for the main gates. That would be a good idea, if they weren't locked. You'll figure it out. Travis said to leave the park. Hiding won't work. You know it'll find you. It'll find me, no matter where I hide. My instincts told me to run and hide, but my mind yelled, get out of the park. There had to be some way to escape. I slowly cleared the open door, looking both ways to make sure nothing was waiting for me. Bang. I looked back to find the main door had shut itself roughly, the noise accompanied by the low clicks of the locks. A low exhale released my stress as I walked away from the door, keeping my eyes on it for a moment, before fear overcame me, and I sprinted straight for the main gates. Don't look back, don't look B. My body hit something, stopping me dead in my tracks, except there was nothing. I stared in the direction of whatever blocked my escape, my eyes catching nothing. My senses, however, told an entirely different story. I felt eyes on me once again, cold, piercing eyes, inhuman. Why, you're not going anywhere. The same unnaturally guttural voice from the phone said after a brief moment of silence. You're staying right here, with us, all of us. Us. If I were you, I would run. The voice menacingly seethed. I've brought some friends to meet you. The voice faded away on the last word, leaving my now unattended attention to drift over to a nearby thicket of tall decorative bushes, which began to madly rustle. A vicious gurgling sound came from them as the rustling intensified. "Oh, my God!" I nervously mumbled. A long, thin, almost skeletal arm with disgustingly pinkish, raw-looking flesh stretched out from the foliage, trembling grotesquely. The clawed hand with unnaturally long, bony fingers scratched the ground it reached for. My instincts once again urged me to run, but the sight of this thing froze me in place. Whether it was from fear, amazement, or a diabolical concoction of the two, I simply couldn't move. My body quaked as the rest of the creature surfaced from the hiding spot. The darkness wouldn't let me make out the specific details of its appearance, but it did give me a disturbing enough idea of what I was dealing with. It was a tall humanoid figure with a body lanky to the point of deformity. Its bony shoulders stretched up to the midway point of its neck. Its legs seemed like they could snap at any moment. Its chest was sunken in, the bones almost emerging from the thin layer of flesh. How this being was even able to stand and walk was beyond my comprehension, but it was doing just that. Much to my terror, its movements were as hideously otherworldly as could be, erratic, twitchy, stiff shambling that looked anything but human. Then, in a split second, its neck twisted toward me, giving me a clear view of its wretched face. The features were deformed and rotten. The eye sockets lacked the eyes, two chillingly dark voids bereft of any emotion. The mouth was stretched out to the point where the skin was tearing at either side. Black bile pulled from its open mouth. It shambled towards me slowly for a moment, making me finally snap out of the spell and walk backward a bit. It stayed like that for a few seconds, me walking backward while cautiously keeping my eyes on the creature's steady approach. I started walking faster, facing away and looking back every few seconds to make sure it wasn't closing in. Its footsteps grew closer. The sounds became rapid. I looked back in a flash to see the being closing in on me. It was no longer shambling. It wasn't even walking at a brisk pace. It was sprinting, with its erratic and unnatural movements more disconcerting than ever. My heart raced. My palms sweat. My legs did their work. I raced away from the being in a terrified sprint of my own. The park was a canvas covered in black paint. The few lights Travis had left on in select spots had all been switched off. Decorative buildings, shops, and restaurants were now caverns. I did have a flashlight with me, but right now, in my mad dash away from the being, the last thing on my mind was to use it. My mind was singularly focused on getting away, which was proving to be more difficult a task than previously thought. For such a weak-looking creature, it could really keep pace. No matter how fast my movement was, it managed to stay right behind me. I ran down Main Street, USA, my path a direct beeline to Cinderella Castle. From there, I planned to make a sharp left turn straight into Adventureland. My mind was already cooking up a great escape plan. Adventureland was home to the famous Jungle Cruise attraction. If I could get out of sight for just 1 second, I would have a good chance to dive into the water and hide under the queue area. It would be perfect, as long as the creature didn't spot me making my escape. The stakes were high, my life was on the line. It would be tiring, but I knew I had to be faster. I put everything I had into it. Every last ounce of energy in me went straight to my legs. I ran at speeds I had never reached before in my life, the gap between me and the creature increasing with every passing second. Sadly, I wasn't in the best shape of my life. Not overweight, but definitely not in the kind of shape desirable for a life or death situation. Nevertheless, I was doing exactly what needed to be done. The creature screeched savagely as I darted out of sight into Adventureland. I picked up the pace as its distant footsteps seemed to be coming closer at an even faster rate. Catching sight of the entrance to the Jungle Cruise made me speed up even more. It was the best, and probably only, chance of staying alive. I ran inside, darted through the queue as fast as I could, and jumped into the water without a second thought. I swam underneath the queue line as planned and grabbed onto one of the large wooden poles holding the attractions building up over the water. Now, waiting. I closed my eyes and held my breath, my ears perceiving the creature's frenzied footsteps approaching the ride building. I tensely looked up when the footsteps started to come from directly above me. The creature had arrived. I could hear it lowly hissing and sniffing. It knew I was here. It just didn't know where exactly, and I was going to keep it that way. The game was cat and mouse. Under no circumstances was I going to let this thing catch me. The footsteps went further away until the creature was standing at the very edge of the loading docks. My eyes caught a chilling glimpse of its bone-like fingers stretching down to swat at the water in an apparent search for its prey. The hand movements got more impatient, signaling its owner's frustration. Just leave already. Whether the creature had the ability to read thoughts was a question I couldn't answer. Its actions did raise suspicion on that matter, though. Both of its hands grabbed onto the loading dock's edge, and its shadow let me know just what it was about to do. Take a peek under the queue area straight into my hiding spot. Oh, hell. Without even thinking, I took a deep but silent breath and allowed myself to drift under the waterline. My figure was engulfed by the darkness of the deep water and remained there, motionless. I made sure of it. I knew so much as the slightest movement could give me away and put the creature on the attack once more. There was one problem, however. I was quickly running out of breath. My head was starting to spin. My eyes were going backward into my skull. My lungs cried out for air. These things persisted to the point where I simply couldn't bear with it any longer. I let my head surface and gasped for air, quickly looking in front of me as soon as my lungs were satisfied. Much to my repressed joy, the creature was gone. I could still hear its movements, but they were getting distant instead of approaching. It didn't appear to be in the queue building anymore from what I could hear. From the sound of it, it seemed to be heading further into Adventureland in the direction of New Orleans Square. If that was the case, then I'd have the perfect chance to get out of the water, quietly sneak in the opposite direction, and find a good hiding place while the creature searched for me elsewhere. Okay, you can do this. So far so good. My inner voice was my only friend and greatest encourager. I had no choice but to heed its words, slowly swimming out from under the queue building and grabbing onto the wooden ledge of the loading dock. I cautiously raised my head a bit to take a steady peek at my surroundings. No visual sign of the creature. I could still hear the noises it made, hissing, growling, grunting, in the distance, but no sign of it actually being close to my position. It was the perfect opportunity to bolt. I lifted myself up to the dock, placing my chest on it, and raised one of my legs as well. I was about to lift up my other leg, but I couldn't. Something grabbed my foot and gave me a jolting tug back, almost forcing me to let go of the ledge. Panic set in immediately. The leg I'd already raised up to the ledge fell back into the water as I madly flailed in place, trying to get loose of whatever had seized me. I kicked the water with my free leg. Nothing happened. I squirmed and shook as manically as I could. Nothing. Suddenly, the force pulled on my leg with full strength. My hands painfully scraped the wood as I was violently pulled back into the water with a loud splash. I swam back to the surface and gasped for air before trying to grab hold of the ledge again. Unfortunately for me, this unidentified entity wasn't finished with me. I was pulled under the waterline once again, both my legs being held together and making it impossible for me to escape. Panic intensifying, I shut my eyes and held my breath. Whatever this new entity was, I didn't want to lay eyes on it. Except, I had no choice. Once my head was above the waterline again, I felt two pairs of fingers set themselves on both my eyes, while my legs remained held in place. There's two of them? The fingers on my eyelids pushed in opposite directions, forcing the eyes open, to the sight of the deformed, skeletal creature shambling toward the edge of the dock. Apparently, the sounds of commotion had drawn it back to my position, and now my cover was blown. The unexpected and unwelcome sight forced a piercing shriek of pure, unadulterated terror out of me. I began wildly thrashing around like a patient at a mental asylum, fearful desperation now risen to an unbearable degree. This time, it actually worked. I felt my legs go loose and the fingers removed from my pressured eyelids. Unfortunately, it was too late. Before I knew it, the bony creature ran and pounced into the water with its arms stretched out towards me and the claws seemingly aimed at my neck. In a gut response, I speedily dove under the water and miraculously avoided the creature's lunge. It splashed down a few feet behind me and began thrashing around to the symphony of its own frenzied grunts and hisses. I didn't even look back. I couldn't. It would be a waste of the few precious seconds I had to escape with my life. I swam away. I swam as fast as I possibly could and latched onto the loading dock's edge for the second time. Raising both legs to the dock at record speed, I got out just in time to avoid the creature's second grab at me. Its claws missed my leg by that much. I actually felt the wind from its swipe. As the creature made quick, spastic movements to get up to my level, I wasted no time in making a run for dear life. I cleared the queue and was out of Adventureland before I even knew it. The creature's frustrated, ear-piercing screams became more distant as I ran into Discoveryland and dove into a thick thicket of bushes, catching my breath from the sprint and giving myself a chance to regain my energy for what would be a full night of running and hiding, if I didn't get killed, that is. The thought alone brought me closer to breaking down into a quivering pile of anxiety-stricken uselessness. I hadn't lived a full life. Not even close. I didn't want to die now, especially not like this. All alone, terrified, with no one to turn to, pursued by a threat I didn't understand, mercilessly slaughtered by demonic beings. You can do this. You're going to make it, don't give up. You aren't going to die like this. As much as I wanted to believe my inner voice's motivational words, it was too tough a task. I wanted nothing more than to make it out of this alive and never return, but what I had just been through made me realize just how hard that was going to be. I was under constant surveillance by these things. The bony demon was visible and could be avoided if I sharpened my senses to the necessary degree. But invisible entities that seized me in the water? I had a sick feeling in my stomach telling me there were others like them all throughout the park. They were probably watching me right now as I lay hidden in the thick brush. Quiet. The skeletal demon was back, madly shambling around close to my position. I backed up against the wall, not daring to create a crack in the bush for a quick peek. This time, it wasn't making any sounds other than footsteps. It was entirely silent, which made its presence all the more unnerving. Once the footsteps were in close proximity, passing by directly in front of the thicket I hid in, I decided to take no chances. I held my breath, the sound of my breathing the only noise I was producing. Eventually, the sounds of its feet subsided, becoming fainter as they seemed to head back in the direction of Adventureland. Curiosity getting the better of me, I decided to take a quick look through the bush. I slowly stretched out both hands and silently pushed open a clearing on the foliage. Nobody. Not a sign of life nearby. I couldn't even hear the creature's footsteps anymore. Until the bushes right next to me rustled, catching my attention and causing me to run out in a dash. A low giggle came from them as well, something which was anything but charming. And then, the footsteps again. I quickly turned to the direction the sound came from and saw something. It wasn't the skeletal demon. It was something else, a man. Or at least it looked like a man. Except it had no eye sockets, hair, clothes, or facial features in general, with the exception of a bloody mouth with the lips and the skin around it nothing more than a shredded mess exposing the jagged teeth and rotten gums. This new entity occupied the space right in front of the Discoveryland entrance. It just stood there, silently, staring me down as if challenging me. Footsteps. Rapid footsteps coming from behind me. I turned in place and saw her. A woman in a white dress sprinting straight for me. Except this was no ordinary woman. It was one of them. Her skin was gray and wrinkled. Her eyes were pupilless. Just two white, emotionless orbs held in place by the sockets. There were no eyebrows above them. Her teeth? There weren't any. Her mouth was a stiff, wide grin, showing off the ghastly, toothless wasteland that was the inside. Not more than a couple of seconds passed before I was running for my life yet again. Thankfully, this female entity wasn't too fast. I found it easy to outrun her. Unfortunately, the eyeless, silent entity appeared in front of me. Just like that, out of thin air. I looked back to make sure I'd lost the woman and found myself staring the eyeless creature in the face. It grabbed onto me and threw me to the ground, a low hiss escaping through its jagged teeth. The impact with the pavement scraped my arm, drawing a small amount of blood. I scrambled to get away and found myself leaving the creature to eat my dust. My heart pounding my chest cavity with full force, I ran into Fantasyland and looked behind me. The eyeless demon was gone, but the rapidly approaching footsteps of the woman let me know I was still in trouble. Unfortunately for me, there were no bushes nearby. I couldn't just jump into a thicket this time around. I would have to go into one of the attractions. Even more unfortunate, the closest one right now, as in right beside me, was It's a Small World. No choice, she's getting closer. I took a deep breath, gathering up the courage, and sprinted over the bridge straight into the entrance. Wasting no precious time, I ran down the stairs and went right into the darkened attraction on foot. My back was placed against a wall inside the attraction, my ears paying careful attention to the female demon's sounds. I could hear her grunting and running around out there. If she was searching for me, she was out of luck. Under no circumstances would I leave my hiding spot. I crouch-walked deeper into the attraction, paying close attention to my surroundings. My deeply unsettling surroundings. The overwhelming silence was an entity on its own. The small world dolls almost seemed to surround me and gaze at every step I took. Their lifeless eyes stared off in aimless directions. Some had their mouths wide open as if screaming in terror. I knew I was doing just that deep down inside. After a few minutes of sneaking through the attraction, I decided to take a little rest. I sat down against a wall and shut my eyes momentarily. How will I make it through this? I've been attacked by 5 of these things already. How many more could there possibly be? If I'm lucky, the answer is none. But judging from my situation, I'd say I'm not very lucky. And if I'm not, I probably won't make it to sunrise. Not alive and well. How did I get myself into this mess? Why did it have to be me? What did I do today? It's a world of laughter, a world of tears. Oh no! It's a world of hopes and a world of fears. There's so much that we share that it's time we're aware, it's a small world, after all. The animatronics began to move on their own. The attraction remained in total darkness, but the music began to play. It's a small world, after all. The voices were a cacophony of madness. Some were normal. Some were in reverse. Others sounded distorted beyond belief. The one thing they had in common, they were all slowed down to ominous effect. I looked around to see, all the animatronic dolls had turned their heads and fixed their dead eyes on me. It's a small world after all, they sang as a demonic cackling sound joined the unholy combination and looped endlessly. The terror within pushed me to run. I suspected they couldn't hurt me, but the sound would surely attract the physically visible demons hunting me down. I ran along the sides of the attraction's river, when something grabbed my arm and twisted it, dropping me to the ground. I was shoved into the water and pushed in face first. They were already here. I scrambled to regain my footing and got out of the river only to find myself face to face with a group of cackling dolls staring directly into my eyes as the others pressed on with their warped, depraved singing. I trembled in place. My legs gave out for a moment. I was now on my knees. I looked around me as the maddeningly distorted sounds incessantly pierced my eardrums and pushed me to the brink of insanity. The small world I knew from my childhood was a calm boat ride through a fantasy world brimming with saccharine sentimentality. This small world was instead a horrifying exercise in frightening, flustering madness. "Stop it!" I painfully screamed, my mind breaking. "Stop it!" No matter where I ran or where I looked, I felt stalked. Each and every one of these animatronics was now under the control of evil spirits keeping watchful eyes on me without a second wasted. The thought alone was causing my mind to stop working properly. I became increasingly disoriented by the insanity surrounding me. As much as I wanted to believe my inner voice's motivational words, it was too tough a task. I wanted nothing more than to make it out of this alive and never return. But what I had just been through made me realize just how hard that was going to be. I was under constant surveillance by these things. The bony demon was visible and could be avoided if I sharpened my senses to the necessary degree. But invisible entities that seized me in the water? I had a sick feeling in my stomach telling me there were others like them all throughout the park. They were probably watching me right now as I lay hidden in the thick brush. Quiet. The skeletal demon was back, madly shambling around close to my position. I backed up against the wall, not daring to create a crack in the bush for a quick peek. This time, it wasn't making any sounds other than footsteps. It was entirely silent, which made its presence all the more unnerving. Once the footsteps were in close proximity, passing by directly in front of the thicket I hid in, I decided to take no chances. I held my breath, the sound of my breathing the only noise I was producing. Eventually, the sounds of its feet subsided, becoming fainter as they seemed to head back in the direction of Adventureland. Curiosity getting the better of me, I decided to take a quick look through the bush. I slowly stretched out both hands and silently pushed open a clearing on the foliage. Nobody. Not a sign of life nearby. I couldn't even hear the creature's footsteps anymore. Until the bushes right next to me rustled, catching my attention and causing me to run out in a dash. A low giggle came from them as well, something which was anything but charming. And then, the footsteps again. I quickly turned to the direction the sound came from and saw something. It wasn't the skeletal demon. It was something else, a man. Or at least it looked like a man. Except it had no eye sockets, hair, clothes, or facial features in general, with the exception of a bloody mouth with the lips and the skin around it nothing more than a shredded mess exposing the jagged teeth and rotten gums. This new entity occupied the space right in front of the Discoveryland entrance. It just stood there, silently, staring me down as if challenging me. Footsteps. Rapid footsteps coming from behind me. I turned in place and saw her. A woman in a white dress sprinting straight for me. Except this was no ordinary woman. It was one of them. Her skin was gray and wrinkled. Her eyes were pupilless. Just two white, emotionless orbs held in place by the sockets. There were no eyebrows above them. Her teeth? There weren't any. Her mouth was a stiff, wide grin, showing off the ghastly, toothless wasteland that was the inside. Not more than a couple of seconds passed before I was running for my life yet again. Thankfully, this female entity wasn't too fast. I found it easy to outrun her. Unfortunately, the eyeless, silent entity appeared in front of me. Just like that, out of thin air. I looked back to make sure I'd lost the woman and found myself staring the eyeless creature in the face. It grabbed onto me and threw me to the ground, a low S escaping through its jagged teeth. The impact with the pavement scraped my arm, drawing a small amount of blood. I scrambled to get away and found myself leaving the creature to eat my dust. My heart pounding my chest cavity with full force, I ran into Fantasyland and looked behind me. The eyeless demon was gone, but the rapidly approaching footsteps of the woman let me know I was still in trouble. Unfortunately for me, there were no bushes nearby. I couldn't just jump into a thicket this time around. I would have to go into one of the attractions. Even more unfortunate, the closest one right now, as in right beside me, was It's a Small World. No choice, she's getting closer. I took a deep breath, gathering up the courage, and sprinted over the bridge straight into the entrance. Wasting no precious time, I ran down the stairs and went right into the darkened attraction on foot. My back was placed against a wall inside the attraction, my ears paying careful attention to the female demon's sounds. I could hear her grunting and running around out there. If she was searching for me, she was out of luck. Under no circumstances would I leave my hiding spot. I crouch-walked deeper into the attraction, paying close attention to my surroundings. My deeply unsettling surroundings. The overwhelming silence was an entity on its own. The small world dolls almost seemed to surround me and gaze at every step I took. Their lifeless eyes stared off in aimless directions. Some had their mouths wide open as if screaming in terror. I knew I was doing just that deep down inside. After a few minutes of sneaking through the attraction, I decided to take a little rest. I sat down against a wall and shut my eyes momentarily. How will I make it through this? I've been attacked by 5 of these things already. How many more could there possibly be? If I'm lucky, the answer is none. But judging from my situation, I'd say I'm not very lucky. And if I'm not, I probably won't make it to sunrise. Not alive and well. How did I get myself into this mess? Why did it have to be me? What did I do today? It's a world of laughter, a world of tears. Oh no! It's a world of hopes and a world of fears. There's so much that we share that it's time we're aware, it's a small world, after all. The animatronics began to move on their own. The attraction remained in total darkness, but the music began to play. It's a small world, after all. The voices were a cacophony of madness. Some were normal. Some were in reverse. Others sounded distorted beyond belief. The one thing they had in common, they were all slowed down to ominous effect. I looked around to see, all the animatronic dolls had turned their heads and fixed their dead eyes on me. It's a small world after all, they sang as a demonic cackling sound joined the unholy combination and looped endlessly. The terror within pushed me to run. I suspected they couldn't hurt me, but the sound would surely attract the physically visible demons hunting me down. I ran along the sides of the attraction's river, when something grabbed my arm and twisted it, dropping me to the ground. I was shoved into the water and pushed in face first. They were already here. I scrambled to regain my footing and got out of the river only to find myself face to face with a group of cackling dolls staring directly into my eyes as the others pressed on with their warped, depraved singing. I trembled in place. My legs gave out for a moment. I was now on my knees. I looked around me as the maddeningly distorted sounds incessantly pierced my eardrums and pushed me to the brink of insanity. The small world I knew from my childhood was a calm boat ride through a fantasy world brimming with saccharine sentimentality. This small world was instead a horrifying exercise in frightening, flustering madness. Stop it! I painfully screamed, my mind breaking. Stop it! No matter where I ran or where I looked, I felt stalked. Each and every one of these animatronics was now under the control of evil spirits keeping watchful eyes on me without a second wasted. The thought alone was causing my mind to stop working properly. I became increasingly disoriented by the insanity surrounding me. However, my eyesight remained perfectly functional. And what I saw made things even worse. On the other end of the room were the skeletal demon and the female both moving around and searching the area. My defensive instincts kicked in and I was hard on my heels. I looked around and saw the door to a supply closet just out of sight, behind a large pillar covered with those wretched cackling dolls. I ran for the door and was pleasantly surprised to find it was open. Why, you're gonna make it, I said to myself, shakily chuckling. They're not going to find you here, except they already had. A single hand grabbed my shoulder, getting a horrified scream out of me and causing me to start blindly swatting around. No! I yelled at the top of my lungs. Leave me alone. The hand joined another as both grabbed my arms, turned me around, clutched the back of my head, and smashed me face first against the wall. My vision blurred. I looked up as the single light bulb on the room's roof lit up, showing me who had just assaulted me, the female demon. How she got in the room was a question I couldn't answer. She looked over me, her toothless grin on full display, and stomped her foot down on my face. From there, silence. Chaotic cackling. Cartoony voices. Foreboding music. Running water. All these sounds joined together within my ears as I slowly came out of unconsciousness to find myself in a log running down a river with cartoon animal animatronics all around me. What? I muttered before realizing I had been locked down in a log on the darkened Splash Mountain. How I got to be in this position was the least of my worries now. I had a feeling this wasn't going to end well. A feeling that was hastily confirmed as soon as I saw what awaited me at the top of the climb for the ride's final drop. A slobbering hunchbacked creature stood on the right side of the lift hill's top, incoherently mumbling to itself while moving around in an unnatural manner and menacingly staring down at me. My mind wasn't working right anymore. All I wanted was to get out, no matter the cost. I grabbed the safety harness pressed down on my lap and began to push up on it. I just wanted out. I pushed up on it violently while grunting and thrashing around in my seat. When I reached the top of the hill and began to bowl over for the drop, the harness snapped open on its own. But by then, it was too late. I went over the drop without anything to hold me down and was promptly launched out of the log. An unseen force pushed me through the air and higher up, making the fall twice as hard. I landed on the bridge in front of the attraction, legs first. Both of them were painfully snapped out of place on impact, rendering me a groaning, broken mess. I clutched at them, which only worsened the searing pain, and screamed in response. The pain was so severe I actually began sobbing pathetically, feeling out of breath from the constant gasps. Then, there they were. Standing at the end of the bridge were the 5 demons who had made themselves physically known throughout the entire ordeal. My hunters. My oppressors, all grouped together. What do you want with me? I furiously screamed as fear mixed with anger inside me. The scream descended into more pathetic tears as the pain in my legs slowly got worse. None of them responded in words, but the skeletal demon began shambling towards me. I tried to crawl away, but it was no use. It only served to further intensify the pain. The bony monstrosity fell on its knees and began crawling and slithering towards me, its pitch-black eyes fixed on me and its facial expressions serious. Once it was a few inches away from my face, it grimly smiled. Then, it was over. The creature lunged at my throat, putting an end to my nightmare once and for all. Yes, my friend. I died that night. So why am I still talking? Well, let's just say I have a new group of friends. The same beings who relentlessly hunted me down that night I now call friends. I died, but I didn't leave. As a matter of fact, I could be right behind you as of this moment. Just a little joke. You're alone. Well, to my knowledge at least. Some of my kind could be lurking in your humble abode without you even realizing it. As for me, I've made a nice home in the place of my death, the happiest place on earth itself. Just remember this, next time you pay a fun visit to this park. I could be participating in your vacation photos. And who knows? Me and my friends We might just pay you a visit once you leave. Just a thought. What was the protagonist's initial reaction when the lights went out in the story? Can you recall the moment of suspense and fear created by the sudden darkness? In Adventureland, what was the protagonist's escape plan? In which attraction did they plan to hide near? Did you visualize the tension as the protagonists strategized their escape? How did the story conclude, and what hint about the protagonist's fate was given in the end? What emotions did the ending evoke, considering the protagonist's transformation into a spectral presence? If you enjoyed the spine-chilling journey through this story, subscribe for more thrilling tales and stay connected for upcoming narratives.